Welcome to Ion Connecticut. I'm Mike Savino. This is part two of our look at the pandemic and its impact on women economically. You just heard in part one, or if you haven't, you should go back and listen to Tori Brown, the owner of Breakfast Bells. But we're also looking more generally at what's happening, what's being done to help women. And so for that, we bring in Fran Pastore. She's the Chief Executive Officer of the Connecticut Women's Business Development Council. Fran, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Mike, for having me today.
And I think before we get into this issue, maybe talk a little bit about what the Development Council is, because obviously people aren't going to be familiar with it unless they're a woman who owns a business.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for that. The Women's Business Development Council helps women launch and scale their businesses. We were established in 1997. I am a founder, and we have been around now for almost 25 years. And I can tell you that this is a timely conversation because our clientele increased by over 600% during COVID. So clearly there is a need out there for women-owned businesses for our service.
And talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, what specifically are they coming to you for? I think people just assume the pandemic has been hard for the business community in general, but what issues are women running into, where we're hearing reports that women-owned businesses and women in the workforce are falling behind?
Well, they certainly are. I mean, look, the old saying, I'm sure you've heard it, women have to work twice as hard to get half as far, right? So with women-owned businesses, I think probably the most important thing to know is that it wasn't until 1988 that women could even access capital in their own name for commercial purposes without having a male co-signer, right? So that's, 32 years ago, 33 years ago, that law was passed that eliminated the need for a male co-signer. So access to capital has always been a challenge. That being said, women have really continued to have to work hard. It takes a woman an average of 6 attempts to get a traditional bank loan, 6 more attempts than her male counterpart. So that is the base that we're working with right now. Add on top of that COVID, homeschooling children, helping our parents. I read a recent article in The Economist that talked about 70% of household burdens during COVID fell on women. So whether you are employed or you are a women-owned business, you are shouldering a disparate amount of burden to running your household.
And you brought up, obviously there's several things that I want to get into there, but you brought up loans, and I talked with Tori of Breakfast Bells specifically about the PPP program, which obviously was meant to help more people get access to funds to keep people employed. Tori got denied her first time. Are you seeing a lot of women have trouble getting PPP? And is there something specifically there that's creating a problem for women-owned businesses?
Well, I think that the PPP was established with the best of intentions. The name was a little bit of a misnomer, and that's what prevented a lot of people, specifically sole proprietors, single member LLCs, from going after it because, well, wait, it's the payroll protection program. I don't have anybody on payroll. No, you have yourself on payroll. And so that was a little bit of the misinformation that WBDC was able to help clear up, right? We put it out there that, if you're a sole proprietor, you may qualify. If you're a single member LLC, you may qualify. If you are a partnership and you don't have payroll, but you are paid, you may qualify. So to be fully transparent, Mike, this was an issue not just for women-owned businesses, but for all micro businesses who did not have the resources like, an accountant on staff or a banking relationship, or didn't have the infrastructure in place that WBDC actually helps folks put into place so that they could be ready to apply for PPP. So a large majority of the assistance that we offered during COVID, and even right now we're offering it in this next round of PPP, was really hand-holding people through the process, oftentimes getting on FaceTime or Zoom, walking through the physical application process. So honestly, the intent of PPP, can't argue with that. the rollout, the idea was to get it rolled out quickly to help as many people as it can. Did it help the people that it was intended to? I think we know that in Connecticut, there were 60,000 businesses that received PPP. My understanding is that roughly 80% of those went to businesses owned by white individuals, and that of that 80%, roughly 75% were male-owned businesses. So was there a disproportionate effect on women-owned businesses? Absolutely. Are we remedying that situation now? Absolutely. And our state has stepped up in a very big way to do so. And it's something I'm really proud of our colleagues at the Department of Economic and Community Development.
And obviously that was meant to try to keep people on payroll. I know Tori had said with her business, she had to let go of, she only had 3 employees. They were all female. She had to let them go. That's a small sample size, but what are we seeing with unemployment? I mean, I saw one report where if you look at the total jobs lost, but also by gender, basically men got all of their jobs back and women did not. Now, maybe individuals might not see that, but if you look at the aggregate numbers, essentially all of the jobs lost equal out to the number of jobs lost by women. What are we seeing in Connecticut with unemployment?
Well, I know that the December jobs report of the 150,000 jobs that the federal government reported, that 99% of them were female. I know from talking to Connecticut DOL just a couple of months ago that overwhelmingly the number of people that had lost jobs were women. So let's talk about that for a minute, because what we do know is that women across all socioeconomic spectrums are being hit by COVID, very different ways. So I am not in any way trying to put everybody in the same bucket, because I know that there are very big differences in the demographics. But here's what's happening. So you have women who are working from home now. They have jobs in the corporate sector. Some of them have demanding jobs. They're managers, right? So now they're managing staff from a distance. They are providing childcare. They are being school teachers. They are doing the laundry. And it's just, we've put on women this overwhelming responsibility. So many of those women have said, I am leaving. I am done. I cannot do this. My mental health is at stake. My relationship, my marriage is at stake. I'm not doing this. And then we have women on the other end of the economic spectrum who are in healthcare, hospitality, retail, education. Many of them have lost their jobs. A lot of them have lost their childcare, where they may have depended on family members before as a result of COVID. Perhaps their aunt, their sister, the grandparent cannot take the child and care for them. And we have limited childcare slots, early childcare slots in the state. We were down before COVID. We've come back up, but we are still down many thousands of slots. So what happens is those women are now out of jobs. Then there are the women that are leaving jobs. And over the course of a woman's lifetime, consider getting back into the workforce and what that means to your work history, your career history. And then think of the impact on the economy with probably billions of dollars in lost revenues and the contribution to the economy being diminished because people don't have those resources to spend. So I'm a big proponent of universal daycare, universal childcare, early childhood education. We're one of the only industrialized countries that does not provide that. And we need to think of childcare as part of our country's infrastructure. When we think about building bridges, when we think about repairing highways, we need to think about childcare, because I believe unless that is addressed, we are going to continue to see this disproportionate impact on women, whether they're business owners or they are in the workforce.
And looking at each of those two groups separately, and certainly childcare is one thing that sort of runs parallel between the two of them as an impact. But looking at women in some of these service industry sectors and other sectors where their job was taken away from them, short of just getting the economy rolling and getting those jobs back, Are there anything we can do for them, whether it's retraining or helping them find new fields in the meantime? Because, we're still sort of open-ended on when this pandemic will end.
Good question. What we've seen, what the state has seen, is a surge in the number of businesses, the number of business starts. Now, just last year, the Secretary of State's office started gathering information on if those businesses were women-owned. And what we've learned is a large percentage of those businesses that are starting are women-owned, and we have seen that at WBDC as well. It's a national trend. We know it's happening in our state. And at WBDC, we've seen an increase of 20% of new startups over the same time period in 2019. So the pandemic has really inspired and motivated creativity and innovation, right? People are saying, you know what, I can do this really well. I've always wanted to do this. And if not now, when? I'm home, I'm going to get it going. And so we have a lot of clients, and I will also share with you that the majority of those women starting businesses are women of color. And so we are really excited at WBDC. Now, on the downside, very little, if any, of the stimulus funding offered by the state and by the federal government, actually none of it was for startups. You have had to have been in business in 2020 and 2019. So what we're doing at WBDC is we just launched a new program that we're really proud of in conjunction with the Lieutenant Governor and DECD. It's called the Equity Match Grant. You can learn more about it on our website, but we're setting aside some of the funds that we've raised for the Equity Match Grant for startups. It's not a big fund, but we feel that special attention has to be paid to these women who are so resilient and innovative and are launching businesses in these very, very difficult times.
And then for the women who fall into that other group, they had a job even through the pandemic, but because of the stresses, they just felt, you know what, I'm going to leave the workforce, at least through the pandemic, focus on taking care of home. I mean, is there something that the state and the Development Council can do to help them? Or is that more of a cultural change of making sure that the burdens of home are shared more equally between both partners? Obviously, that's going to take that's not something you could do. But, is that the solution, or is there something the state can also do to sort of, in the meantime, go, you know what, we're helping you out so you can get back?
I think this administration, well, yesterday, the governor and the lieutenant governor announced the priorities for the Governor's Council on Women and Girls, which I believe is addressing exactly this. They are very well aware of how this pandemic has disproportionately impacted women. I know that the Governor's Workforce Council is working on a lot of different initiatives, but the big thing that's happening is that under Commissioner Beth Bai at the Office of Early Childhood, there is a tremendous initiative to work on Connecticut's childcare industry and get them, those businesses were operating on thin margins already, and they are working very closely with WBDC to not only put funds in the hands of those childcare providers and those early childhood educators so that they can reopen and rebuild their infrastructure so that people can get back to work quickly and have some means of hopefully affordable childcare. So we're training that industry. We are providing them with funds to build their infrastructure so they are in a better position when another crisis hits. And I think that there's a lot of programs going on like that. In our state, we're very lucky to have those. And I think at a national level, this crisis is also being looked at, I know, by our own Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who's leading the charge for, universal childcare support.
And certainly this crisis has highlighted a number of problems that we've had, including, the stuff we've been talking about. So I guess just looking more long term, I mean, do you envision some of these programs continuing and closing these gaps, or do you just think once the pandemic's over, we'll stop trying to address these problems and go back to normal? I see a little smile on that face, but I mean, what do you envision long term? Is this trying to find maybe a silver lining here, that maybe we've realized some of these problems, or as we've done, we don't really deal with them until they're smacking us in the face?
Well, recognizing that millions of people have died and many of them are friends and family members, right? But there are several silver linings, and the whole disparity among minorities, and the fact that we knew that those inequities existed, but that COVID has really risen them to the surface and we're looking at them. When you think about something as simple as the Crown Act being passed in our state, that's big. So I would like to think that some of these programs are going to last and be a new way of life, right? I also think that there's been enough buzz about how women have been disproportionately impacted and how in particular Black and brown women have been disproportionately impacted. And I hope that we all take a step back and really start looking at these inequities, because over the course of a lifetime, we have to recognize that, these are not gender issues and they are not race issues, they are economic issues. And when there's a strong economy, everyone wins and everyone benefits. One of the things that I'm aware of is that back during the Second World War, there was universal child care for every woman who was working in the war effort, right? The men were at war and the women were working in the factories. And we've all seen that picture, of, the we can do it, right? Well, we did do it. And the United States federal government provided universal child care at the time for the women who were working for the war effort. When the war came to an end, so did the child care program. So I'm hoping that if we did it once, we know how to do it again. And this time, maybe it will stick. And so I'm, really proud to be from Connecticut, where there is an agenda that is looking at not just paying lip service, but is really truly looking at the programs or at the inequities that face women and girls in our state. And I'm hoping that this childcare model that WBDC is working on with Commissioner Bai and her team, I'm hoping that it becomes a national model, because we need to treat these businesses that mostly exist to help women women and families make a living. I'm hoping that what we are doing in Connecticut can serve as a role model for other states.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting to see some of these programs, how much will there is to continue it even after the pandemic, and not just seeing it as a short-term fix to a short-term problem. Fran, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Was that okay?